Shalom Chaverim. This week, parashat Vayeshev, and we're going to do it together with no other than the Brothers Grimm. This is a beautiful book, beautiful edition of the complete stories or complete fairy tales, which were collected by the Brothers Grimm. So, let's begin actually in their own words. Our fatherland is still filled with wealth of material all over the country that our honest ancestors planted for us, and that, despite the mockery and derision heaped upon it, continues to live unaware of its own hidden beauty and carries within it its own unquenchable source. Our literature, history, and language cannot seriously be understood in their old and true origins without doing more exact research on this material. Consequently, it is our intention to track down as diligently as possible all the following items and to write them down as faithfully as possible. So this is actually taken from the appeal made by the Brothers Grimm to their surrounding friends and colleagues to basically record and send them any folk tales that they have heard or that they know that people are telling for their collection and their preservation. It is known as the circular letter concerned with collecting of folk poetry. And they sent it in the year 1815. So, despite common misconceptions by actually many people, the Brothers Grimm never authored any of those famous fairy tales, such as Little Red Riding Hood and Cinderella and Snow White and Rapunzel and all those fairy tales that we know nowadays from Disney. They never authored them. They actually just collected them as part of their role as professors and librarians where they lived. And their first edition for the collection was titled Kinder und Hausmärchen, which is basically children and household tales, and it came out at 1812, and it was actually not intended to entertain children. The opposite. This was actually meant for adults. Some of the clues that we can get for the fact that it was not meant for children is that if you actually read what's in this book, it's incredibly violent and brutal, and is nothing like the Disney versions of it that we know. And they actually had a political mission in with this collection. So this really came shortly after the Napoleonic conquests of the German land. And here were the Brothers Grimm in what in Germany, but not the Germany that we know today. It was actually a collection of dozens of provinces. It was not one unified country. And in addition to this, territories that were just recently conquered, a language that was looked down upon, and an entire culture that began to disintegrate. So the Brothers Grimm had a mission with collecting those stories to bring back to the German people a sense of the spirit of their past, their culture, their heritage. And that was the purpose of this collection. And we'll get back to that. Top portion, Vayeshev. So Vayeshev begins, if you will, a fairy tale of our own. This is the fairy tale of Joseph. And if you look at the components and the tropes that are in the Joseph story, they are very much reminiscent of fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. Something that starts with sibling jealousy, for example, and that jealousy comes from parent favoritism. And then really a journey, right? A journey that takes someone from rags to riches, back to rags, back to riches, working for a king, solving dreams, and all of these ups and downs have that fairy tale quality like. But what's really important in Vayeshev is actually coming from a midrash that I'm going to share with you, and that midrash really aligns with the mission that the Brothers Grimm had. So this comes from Midrash Tanchuma, and it really revolves around the part where Joseph is working for Potiphar, who was a higher rank in the king's court, and he bought Joseph when Joseph was sold to slavery after his brothers sold him. So, ויהי אדוני את יוסף, ויהי איש מצליח, ויהי בבית אדוניו המצרי. Adonai was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he stayed in the house of his Egyptian master. Okay, so that is Potiphar. וירא אדוניו כי אדוני איתו, וכל אשר הוא עושה אדוני מצליח בידו. And when his master saw that Adonai was with him, and that Adonai lent success to everything he undertook, וימצא יוסף חן בעיניו, וישרת אותו, ויפקידהו על ביתו, וכל יש לו נתן בידו. He took a liking to Joseph, he made him his personal attendant, and put him in charge of his household, placing in his hands all that he owned. So these are the psukim, the verses from the Torah, right? So we know that God was with Joseph and that he was very successful. But the Torah doesn't give us any details as to how, in what way it was successful. And here comes the Midrash. The Midrashim always come to really fill in the details that the Torah omits. And let me read to you directly from the Midrash. Actually, before I read directly, what it says is that Potiphar himself, what the Midrash tells us, was a very unstable person, in a sense that he kept changing his mind. So the Midrash tells us that, for example, when Joseph would bring wine to Potiphar, after Potiphar asked for a certain kind of wine, so Joseph would bring it, and then it was like, you know what, I actually want another one. So if he would ask for a sweet wine, Joseph would pour it to the cup, and then Potiphar would say, I actually want the spicy one. So what God would do is change the wine in the cup to the spicy one. So every time Potiphar changed his mind, God made it happen. And apparently that's what really impressed Potiphar. And so much so that he entrusted his entire estate to Joseph for his management. The important part of the Midrash goes like this. As soon as he realized his own importance, that means Joseph realized his own importance. Siren downtown. He began to eat, drink, and curl his hair and say, Blessed be the omnipotent one who has caused me to forget my father's house. Whereupon the Holy One, blessed be he, rebuked him, saying, Your father mourns for you in sackcloth and ashes, but you eat and drink and curl your hair, therefore your mistress will impose herself on you and will torment you. So as we know, the whole Potiphar estate did not last long. Long story short, for those of you who may be unaware, Potiphar's wife fell in love with Joseph, seduced him, and when Joseph rejected her, she blamed him for trying to rape her, essentially, and Joseph was thrown in jail. The Midrash tells us that happens because Joseph forgot his father's house. So, if you forget where you come from, you're gonna come down from riches to rags. Now, as we know, the story of Joseph continues to then going out of prison and eventually becoming even more successful, becoming second to the king, managing the entire region in food supply in times of famine. And he does not forget his ancestors. Eventually, he brings his family down to Egypt and reconciles with them. But several generations after that, after Joseph died and all of his immediate family, and when a new Pharaoh came and enslaved the Jewish people, Moses is called, for those of you who remember, through the burning bush, to be the one to liberate the Jewish people. And famously, Moses asks God, when I come to liberate them, when they ask me, who is this God that came to liberate us, what should I tell them? And God famously tells him, basically, Moses asks, what is your name? And God famously tells him, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be who I will be, not giving him a name, but God does give him an answer. And that is important to our discussion. And the answer God gives Moses is, ויאמר עוד אלוהים אל משה, כה תאמר אל בני ישראל, אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, שלחני אליכם, זה שמי לעולם וזה זכרי לדור ודור. And that translates to, and God said further to Moses, thus shall you speak to the Israelites, Adonai, the God of your fathers, or your father's house, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, he sent me to you. This shall be my name forever. And here in translation, it's not a good translation, but basically what he continues to say, my memory in every generation. And this is so important for our discussion, because what God essentially tells Moses here is you're going to unify your people and liberate them not by a promise of some metaphysical God that they cannot perceive, but by the memory of their ancestors. What unifies them is memory, is culture, tradition, and mutual ancestry. And that was exactly the mission of the Brothers Grimm. They were students of I would say like a philosopher that is a German philosopher who's associated with Romanticism, who died shortly before Germany was conquered, and that was Johann Gottfried Herder. And Herder famously said that the spirit of a nation could be found in folktales and in poetry and in dance. And the Brothers Grimm, who were students of Herder, basically knew that the folktales were the great tool to try and unify the German people in their trying times. Now, the Grimm brothers came to this from a liberal worldview, meaning they were against monarchy, absolutism, etc. But unfortunately, those nationalistic sentiments that they expressed through these folktales and nationalistic goals were later on adopted very warmly by the Third Reich or by the Nazi Party, who really look at those folktales as a way to, again, rally and unify the German people, but this time giving it a racial context. And not only that, in the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, you can find a lot of anti-Semitic tropes, beginning with the portrayal of villains as greedy with, big noses, and down to an actual very famous Brothers Grimm fairy tale called The Jew in the Thorns. Whereas a Jewish person is tortured, and when that Jewish person basically asks for justice, he ends up being hanged for being a Jew. That is actually in this book, and which is important that it is in this book, and understandably so. The Brothers Grimm collected fairy tales that dates, medieval Europe, which part of the culture definitely included those stories. So I think that out of all of this, we have to ask a very important question that is relevant to our time and even in the 21st century, which is, where is the line between the pride and the preservation of a collective memory for maybe nationalist causes, and where those causes, and between where those causes are become murderous and oppressive. And I feel like that this question is still very relevant, just as much as Cinderella and Snow White is. Shabbat Shalom.